Welcome to Before It Was Mainstream, a 40-year archive of radio interviews presented by Hieronimus Co. Beginning in 1988, at the height of the talk radio boom, Doctors Bob and Zoh Hieronimus hosted programs showcasing topics that are a little more common to hear about now: astrology, metaphysics, holistic healing, extraterrestrial life. At the time, these were considered by many too unusual to be taken seriously. Their most widely known program, 21st Century Radio, aired nationally and officially wrapped in April of 2025. I'm Sika Wheeler, Associate Producer for H&Co, and I've spent the past 2 years digging through cassettes of these interviews and learning about the lifelong work of the Hieronymuses. This podcast is a way to share this knowledge with a new generation of listeners and for already established audiences to revisit their favorite guests from over the years. Hopefully these clips will be thought-provoking, inspiring little nuggets to turn over in your mind. The full interviews will be available to stream at 21stcenturyradio.com. But before we get to those, I wanted to give Dr. Zoh a chance to share her perspective on this transition from the world of broadcasting and journalism to now looking back at the fruits of her and Dr. Bob's labor. Thanks so much for joining us on this journey, and here's the interview. So, Zoh, help us understand the context that these interviews come from. So especially for new listeners, what was going on culturally in those early years of broadcasting?
You know, in the 1980s, those of us who had already been part of an activist community in the 60s and 70s, and those of us, like my husband and myself, who were both students of the Western mystery tradition, which is a tradition that espouses that we are more than just physical bodies, that we are souls having a physical experience, that we are spiritual beings inside a temporary physical form. And from there, you can extrapolate to a lot of different things, such as extraplanetary communication. I mean, all of the native traditions worldwide speak to elders from the stars coming down to the earth and giving them information, particularly after the Ice Age, of how to survive. Other issues like the invisible forces, angels, ancient elders on the other side, even deceased loved ones being able to shape our lives and help us and guide us, is in keeping with every tradition worldwide. What we were talking about very explicitly, whereas the culture in general might have been hinting to things, we found not only were we giving voice to the elders, the ancient earth elders, as well as to the cultures of the world, things that everybody held in common. So it was we were literally looking at the common ground, whether it was Hindi or African or North American or South American. It didn't matter where on the planet. These teachings find themselves in every tradition, whether it's religious or something you wouldn't refer to as religious, a spiritual path. The things we found objectionable in culture at the time was this gross materialism, that the only thing in the world was the physical world that you could see, and the brutality of it in the sense of making war everywhere on the planet, or supporting wars, or war being part of our economy, or war being a way of life. We both found barbaric, and that it doesn't speak to the true nature of why we're here. Why we're here is to serve each other, to care for the planet, to evolve as a humanity together, not separate, not as people of one state or one nation, but as earth people, which my husband, Dr. Bob, spoke about all the time. And so the topics we selected were very broad. We went from things like laying on of hands, to near-death experience, to Bigfoot, to off-planet communication, to why traditions speak to their elders coming from the star system of Sirius or Pleiades or Lyra. It's not uniform. What's uniform about it is the attestation to the fact that we as Earth beings, we as people of the Earth, have always been part of a much bigger society, a galactic society. So that was part of our focus, and people found that really objectionable. Other than other people like ourselves, the new paradigm, as it was referred to for those of us that were involved academically, which we both are and were, was a way of describing this colossal change that was beginning, and we are now feeling it and seeing it more prevalent in our society, that the way we view ourselves in the world was changing. People were coming to appreciate that we are not just physical beings, we are spiritual beings. And what does that mean? That means that when you serve somebody, you do it with loving kindness. You don't extract some sort of, return for your effort. We were we were very supportive of all different kinds of movements that were involved in social justice or the environment or animal rights, human rights. Even apartheid in sports was something Dr. Bob and I worked on. He specifically for a very long time with showing that the Negro League baseball players, as an example, were exceptional athletes and performed better than most of the others in the white leagues. And so we worked for years in proceeding to get them into the Hall of Fame and taking them to the White House and things like that. And then there were so many topics that what we were covering were new to many listeners. I think the other thing we had as an advantage is that as students of the Western mystery tradition, which could be Theosophy or Anthroposophy or Rosicrucians, and these names might be new to some people listening, or to the Native Americans, or to the African natives, to any community, the Hindu tradition, the Judaic tradition, the Christian mystery tradition. All of these traditions unify around the fact that we are evolving beings. And what that means is there's a lot of inner work each one of us has to do. Today they call it self-development. We didn't really call it self-development. We called it evolution. So I think many of the things that have taken root now in our common culture, and we were so far ahead, that it made it very difficult for many people in the media, for many people in the broadcast community, for many people in the listening audience to think we were anything but a little crazy. And I remember when I founded the Ruscombe Mansion Community Health Center, which is the oldest holistic healing center in the country, if not the world, I don't know, that's not centered around a specific spiritual or religious tradition or centered around a particular physician. It was built, again, on this notion that if we brought in all these different capacities with homeopathy, nutrition, acupuncture, Rolfing, chiropractic care, iridology, massage, meditation, that if you could put that all in one place for people, that your healing could be accelerated, and that the practitioners themselves would benefit by the close association. And so when I founded that in 1984, that was really the first center of its kind anywhere in the country. And it's still in operation today. I retired in September of 2024 after 50 years, of half a century of overseeing both the center and the property that it's on. And now that it continues, it definitely has a different face and character and quality. When we started, you couldn't find many places to practice yoga. You couldn't find acupuncture. You couldn't find anthroposophical medicine. Still, that's very rare in this country, but not in Europe. You couldn't find homeopathy. And now you can go into any major city in the United States of America or almost the world, and you can find people who practice these great holy healing arts. So that was just one aspect of our shared effort. And then when we came to broadcasting together, it was wondrous. I mean, to tell you the thrill makes me tear up. It was like a blessing that all the lords on the other side and all of our ancestors had said, "Here, talk for us." So a lot of times it would be our personal opinions, but I never felt that it was about me. It was about expressing something that is so ancient and so far looking into the future, which is why when we speak about our broadcast, that's really what we've done our whole lives and what united us when we first met in the 1970s. And when I met my husband, Dr. Bob, I thought, oh my God, he's an artist, an extraordinary painter, muralist, thinker, historian. And at the time I was a dancer, a songwriter, a painter, a sculptor. We had a lot in common, but what really bonded us was our desire to be of service and our commitment to the esoteric path. And so when we went to radio together, that was the joy. It was just simply a joy to be of service to the community in this way.
And how, so I'm hearing you say how ahead of your time you were. And I don't think anyone who listens to these interviews and understanding when they were released, would doubt that. But being ahead of your time isn't always easy. How ready were people to receive what you were trying to put out there? And how did you stay focused? How did you stay the course even if there was resistance?
Well, we were ridiculed a lot by the media. I mean, that went on for a long time. I remember when I founded Ruscom and they did a story about its founding. The headline was Witch Doctor, WITCH, Witch Doctor. And that's a holy reality anyway. I mean, why defame something that's been with our planet forever? Witch doctors do great work, as do shamans. I don't think either one of us really cared, truthfully. We're both very iconoclastic. We're both very courageous warriors. We had each other, and we were so certain that what we were doing was true. We never doubted what we did. And speaking for myself personally, even when I later in life became a whistleblower with a commercial radio program for 10 years, when I went up against the status quo of the FBI, the CIA, the Army, it didn't matter what. People would say, weren't you afraid? And I said, yeah, I was afraid, but it didn't change my doing it. And that's what courage is. Courage is doing something even in the face of fear. But in the topics we covered on 21st Century Radio, I don't think there was ever fear, because we brought on the most stupendous guests in every field, whether it was geology or astrophysics or healing or, the invisible, or people like Raymond Moody, who, for instance, who in the 60s helped pioneer the whole understanding of life after death. We brought on people who themselves were so out of the box, so far ahead of the curve, that we had a community. We were a community of people who are now elders, and many of our beloved colleagues are on the other side now. And no doubt we'll join them there one day too. But I think together it was quite a force. And we developed such a fine reputation around the nation, if not the world, that it was never difficult for us to get a guest. Because we were one of the very few outlets anywhere that somebody who was very far ahead of the curve, talking about, for instance, how ancient the earth is, not millions of years, but billions of years. Somebody who was talking about the age of the Sphinx, that it's not at all what we've been led to believe. Someone who's talking about life after death, that we don't die. The body dies, but the consciousness continues, and you can continue to influence those on the physical plane. And that meditation, like, TM meditation, we had people on who proved that if you meditate in an area, you can bring down the crime rate. That was very new to everybody. Chiropractic care, which the AMA did its best to destroy. So we brought on chiropractors who fought that. And there were court rulings against the AMA saying that they couldn't defame chiropractic. All these sorts of things happened during that time period, or a little earlier, but we were covering it. So even though the media in general made fun of us, though they covered us because we were an exceptional story. I mean, it was fun. Fun for them, and actually fun for us. And Bob was on television all the time talking about everything we were doing. I tended not to be as involved in television, but in newsprint. So we kind of split our skills. Though I did host a TV show, a children's cable show, and he and I co-hosted a cable show called 21st Century Radio, 21st Century News. And we also contributed to a Fox 45 channel for 2 years, where we produced the script for their host to present. But they would always end it like, we'd do a show on Bigfoot. Bigfoot is very real. The Sasquatch, it's the Yeti. You can call him whatever you want. The same thing with, Chessie or other beings that have survived from the Ice Age. And at the end of the clip, we'd bring on all these facts and all these scientists and all this real stuff. And at the end, they go something like, but we don't believe that, do we? And so we would work 12 hours to produce these 2-minute pieces, and they would kind of end it with this subjective, well, we don't know if this is true, but that's not how we felt. And so actually we learned from that, and then we did the cable show. We learned from those experiences in the 80s that you could produce radio. You could work, 5 hours for a show or 8 hours for a show and get 3 hours out. Whereas in television, you could work 12 hours and get 2 minutes out. So radio became a very logical place to go. Plus, we had no gatekeepers. There were no editors. There were no publishers. We were free to bring to the public extraordinary people from around the world who themselves were very courageous mavericks, iconoclasts, and genius.
And so just thinking about media gatekeepers, how was the stations that you were on? I know there was a number, but you were on WCBM for the longest time.
Yeah, but as our weekend program, 21st Century Radio, we were like other paid programs. We paid for our program. So we weren't their employees. My show, however, the Zoh Show, which aired for 10 years on that station, I was an employee of the station, and I had a daytime 3-hour, 2-hour, and 3-hour program like other talk show hosts, mostly men around the country, covering politics and world affairs and the economy and the wars. But I followed the same pattern. I still brought on just exceptional guests from anywhere and everywhere who were themselves. It was the longest aired whistleblower program, I believe, in American broadcast history. I did a lot of whistleblowing about corruption in the CIA or the FBI or the local police or the sheriff or whatever. And I was not particularly loved. But when I was a host, of course, I had conversations often with the station manager and even the owner. And they would doubt what I was doing and then only discover that maybe a year later, like when I covered Waco and defamed, what they were doing because Attorney General Janet Reno, they treated the Branch Davidians like they were foreign enemies, and they used warfare gas and warfare tanks. But once we got cell phones, my whole work as a broadcaster changed, because then I could have live eyewitnesses calling into my program live and telling us what was going on, not with the general media, which always said the same thing. They were almost always uniform. It didn't matter which network you listened to, or which radio station you listened to for that matter. I could tell a different story. So I think I want to go back to something you asked me initially about how we felt about doing what we did, and I got very emotional about it because it's a soul calling. It's not like many people who do podcasts or who do broadcasts or who do television shows, which is very much about them. We really weren't in the business for us. We were in the business for everyone. And we did our work so that all of us could grow and progress and learn together. And that was the same thing with my Zoh show. It turned out that both parties loved me and hated me. I got awards, from our state legislature because of my work on the Constitution or understanding the hideousness of certain legislation. I opposed NAFTA and GATT as an example, not because I was opposed to foreign trade, but I read these documents. And I think that was also the difference, going back to Dr. Bob and I on 21st Century Radio. We read every book written by every person we interviewed. Most broadcasters don't have the interest, don't have the time, and they just read the little insert that the publicists send you. We didn't do that. We read every book. Each of us read thousands and thousands and thousands of books because we felt that to honor the work of the people we were interviewing, we had to understand their perspective, not what a publicist's questions would be. And I think that gave us the edge over anybody in the business, which is why people were so attracted as guests to coming on our program and why we really got the best of every field.
So I want to end on just thinking about where we're headed. We're in a transition. Here we are in the 21st century. How are you feeling about the cultural context that you're living in now and about recording something new?
I'm an elder. I've come of age. I'm in my 70s. My husband's in his 80s, so we're official elders. And it gives you, I think, a little more patience and maybe not as much fear. If I were younger, looking at the world today, I think I would be catastrophizing everything. I would be so afraid of the climate, of earth changes, all things we talked about. We've been doing this since the 80s, talking about climate change, earth changes. But so have all the native traditions been talking about that. I wrote a book called White Spirit Animals, Prophets of Change, which looked at traditions that said when these white animals show up, it's because we're in for imminent earth changes. I think culturally, I mean, I don't want to get too deeply into politics, but I think what's happening in this country as of now, June of 2025, is heartbreaking. But I also believe that sometimes when things are darkest is when the greatest light is born. I'm a student of Kabbalah, and it actually teaches that. And you can experience that. You turn out the lights and you light a little match, that flame is brilliant. So I feel like because it's so dark, and that's the way I would characterize it, and so nefarious, almost diabolic. I mean, I don't want to get into religious terms would characterize it but I think in terms of as souls, for souls that are more evolved and more developed, we're here. We all chose to be here for this time period. So we've chosen to be here to build something that can survive disaster, whether it's political, whether it's financial, whether it's environmental. We as souls and all those brave little beings like my granddaughter, who's only in her little toddler years, who choose to incarnate now, we are an incredible group of souls. And I believe many people speak to a change in consciousness, that there's a shift in even the energy on the planet. And some people attribute that to off-planetary beings, more relationship with extraterrestrial elders, which certainly we know is true and is happening. We've been part of that effort to kind of override the United States government's capacity to make you doubt what you even see with your own eyes, or, threaten military people who have had real experience with beings from someplace else, and then threaten their lives, their livelihood, their family's ability to be, etc. And they're brave enough still to come forward. And we've worked with people like that from all over the country, as we have abductees. So these are real experiences that are shaping a certain kind of quiet, I'd almost call it a quiet awakening that is taking place around the world. It's not unique just to us in America. This is happening all over the world. And in some parts of the world, it's happening faster than here because the opposition isn't so ferociously endowed with power, finance, and military weapons. So there's a quieter underground seed that's beginning to germinate. And when I look forward, I'm very hopeful. I really am. I used to say I'm a cheerleader for paradise, and I am. I think we are all given, when we incarnate, the seal of paradise on our soul, and that's perfection. And that's what each one of us longs for. All of us are shaped by our struggles, our injuries, our losses, our illnesses, our challenges. But I'd like to leave it with this one interesting teaching that is from the Hasidic tradition, of which I'm a student. And it's about revealed good and concealed good. Revealed good is, in our lives, we're happy, we have a job, we have a loving partner, things are going well, we're happy, la la la, isn't it great? That's called revealed good. But it's taught that actually concealed good, which is when we're in the midst of loss, illness, a breakup of a relationship, the loss of a job, a sinkhole, a hurricane, flooding, that there is a greater good hidden inside of that. I mean, some people call it the silver lining of a tragedy, but it's more profound than that. It's telling us that we're in a period of such great, what's the right word, challenge by such an old system called a patriarchy. And the patriarchy is part of what I refer to as a death economy. It has warred on the land. It's warring on women's bodies. It's warring on the autonomy of the individual to have sovereign rights, which are God-given, to say what you can and can't do with your own body. It's nobody's right. And certainly when it comes to our children, it's a parent's right, not the state's right, not a church's right, not a government, not a party. It's nobody else's right. So I think these issues of sovereignty, for me, that's the fundamental challenge. And the one that if I were a younger person and out there fighting something, I think that would be my choice, would be to fight for the sovereignty of each human being, every human being, regardless of race, religion, age, color, nation. The sovereignty of the human being is a God-given, not a privilege, it's an inheritance. And I think that this inheritance is the thing that undergirds everything, whether it's war, whether it's the loss of food stamps, whether it's the loss of a woman's right to protect herself, to do for her body what she wants, whether it's the right of a state to make its own laws and keep them, whether it's the right of another nation to say, no, we don't want your GMO poison food. No, we're like India. We're going to keep our own grains. We're going to stay out of that genetic monster business. So sovereignty applies to everything, really, not just our human bodies. It applies to the right of groups of people to voice their own opinion and not to be called terrorists because they're voicing their own opinion. You know, this goes back to the Clinton administration. When the crime bill was being created, that's when they began calling domestic protests terrorists. And I mean, I went crazy over that. I went crazy over a lot of stuff. And I think also now as an elder looking back at all the work that Bob and I did and the work that I did on the Zoh show and then later Future Talk, pretty much everything I predicted has come to pass. And one of the things I used to debate people on was artificial intelligence. So we'll just look at one little specific of the current shift or paradigm shift we're in. Artificial intelligence can be a wonderful tool, like any tool. You know, your knife at your table can be great. It can help you cut your food. You can also kill somebody with it. Artificial intelligence is no different than any other tool. The tool can be used, but it can also be abused. It can be so diminishing to the human ability to think for ourselves, to use our intuition, to communicate at a distance, to heal at a distance, to speak with other planetary beings. Artificial intelligence is not really artificial. It's man-made. And I think people forget that. I don't even know why it's called artificial. There's nothing artificial about it. It's controlled. It's managed. This is about, so many other things are like this, is about controlling human behavior and controlling human thought. And that to me is the most frightening part about everything that's happening right now. And again, we come back to sovereignty. I want our young people to be able to know that intuition and creativity is a beautiful, beautiful gift of love and life and beauty. And that to rely on a machine to tell you what to think, where to go, or to be tracked where you are and what you've done and what you've seen and who you've spoken to and what words you use, that should be alarming to anybody and everybody. And, you know, this whole techno society, which is like when we moved from the Iron Age and then we moved into the fossil fuel age and now we've moved into the techno age, there's some wonderful things about it that can really save lives and help lives. And there's some really horrendous things about it that can destroy lives. And so, again, I'd like to just leave on this issue of, I believe in the future of humanity. You know, people say, oh, we're all going to die and the earth's going to be destroyed. And it's possible. I mean, it is possible that all our bodies will be destroyed, but our souls won't. And it does happen. I mean, we've had many epochs where there's no life on Earth. I mean, look at Mars. That was once a thriving society. What happened? There are a lot of theories that another, community came and nuked them, and the rovers have been up there looking for particular isotopes to prove it. I remember when I broke the story of carbonaceous meteorites on Mars, which was showing that there was water on Mars, which Bartholomew Nash had already spoken of in the 60s. Here I was in the 80s breaking this big story with some wonderful people from NASA and elsewhere. And nobody could believe that Mars had water, or that Mars had rivers, that there was ever life on Mars. And then, of course, there was proof that the Phaeton Pyramid on Mars, and then that there were other artifacts on Mars showing that there had been a civilization. And yes, now it's very common knowledge. Yes, Mars had rivers, Mars had an ocean, et cetera, et cetera. So, when you're very far ahead, and I'll say this to everybody in the listening audience who themselves might be a future thinker, a warrior, in the sense of for the good. I don't mean for the evil, weaponry. I mean for the good of humanity. To know, just do it. Do it anyway. I used to close my show, if you do it, it will happen. And I believe this. And yes, the Earth might go through some really cataclysmic changes, which it does cyclically anyway. We actually have glacial ages so that we can remineralize the soil. I mean, there are reasons the Earth has its own cycles, just like all the other planets in our solar system have had cycles. And yes, it's possible, but it doesn't really mean that our efforts as a humanity will be for naught, or that our experiences as incarnate souls, we have many incarnations. It's good to make the most of every one of them. Again, I'm a cheerleader for paradise, and I believe that humanity will come of age, we will mature, we will grow up, we will get invited into the galactic society and become what we're meant to be, which is a society of people who know what it is to be of service, to love, and to do their very best to let sovereignty be the banner of our planet. Free will. Free will is really the experiment of the Earth being, and that requires being a sovereign being. So may our free will guide us all to doing the best we can to improve life everywhere.
Before It Was Mainstream is a Hieronimus Co. retrospective with Doctors Bob and Zoh Hieronimus. This show is produced and edited by Sika Wheeler and associate produced by Carly Pryor. The original audio was created by executive producer Laura E. Kortner and hosted by Doctors Robert and Zohara Hieronimus. To find full interviews available to stream for free, head to 21stcenturyradio.com. That's 21stcenturyradio.com.